Okay, before we get into today's dynamic discussion, I want to bring in GPEC President and CEO Chris Camacho. Under his leadership, they have attracted more than 414 companies, creating over 74,000 jobs and generating 11 billion in capital investment. Chris, great to see you. I know you're pretty excited for today's discussion, so I'll kick it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And thanks everybody for joining us today. What an esteemed set of panelists for this discussion. I wanted just to take you a little bit back in time. Greater Phoenix Economic Council for the past several years has been focused on building a more inclusive economic plan for our region. So we're well aware that we're going to be one of the fastest growing regions from a population perspective, from a GDP perspective, and that's going to continue. So the good news is post-pandemic, we're going to see Arizona and the region become one of the fastest growing and even more dynamic than most other US markets in regards to job growth and personal income growth and all the other macro factions that we measure our economy by. But what's really critical about the topic today, and I think there was certainly a light shed upon this particular issue, is this rising increased focus or need to focus on equity, and hence why we need to be inclusive in this economic growth paradigm that we're advancing. So the Paycheck Protection Program from about a year ago and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program referenced the need to push liquidity in to help small businesses. Over 99% of our businesses in Arizona are categorized as small business, and yet as we began to dive deep into the numbers, we found a pretty stark disparity in regards to those kind of micro businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses that were able to access the level of capital needed not only for survival, but for growth as well. So this conversation, I think, is very germane to the inclusive economic growth conversation. And it wouldn't be without Robin, who I've had a great relationship with over the years, Taniqua as well, and even Hustle Phoenix, who I think we met years ago as we talked about, how to advance urban youth outcomes as well. And so this conversation today is certainly timely. And it's one that I believe sets a new course or charters a new course for our region that embraces all Arizonans and allows us to celebrate the contributions of the Black business community to the entire fabric of our region. It probably goes without saying, but we've been in a period over the last few years where there's been, mass racial challenges, and certainly I would acknowledge the tensions that exist of the targeting of minority population, specifically the Asian population today. And we as a community believe that diversity is our greatest strength, and we certainly condemn any of the targeting that's been placed in the last few weeks on the Asian community. We've bound together and we'll continue to work together for better outcomes for all of our citizens. So with that, it's my supreme ability, or I'm just so humbled to be able to participate in this event today. I've seen the great work that Taniqua has done over the years. And we were so fortunate, along with Drew and Kristen and our research and analytics team, along with Sharon Huang, our COO, and others, to be able to dive in kind of arm in arm, lock arms on what we feel is very important to shed a light upon in regards to this great community that we live in. So with that, Eric, again, thanks for the opportunity today. I'm really excited to share the report that's coming forward and the specific details. As I shared with our team before we jumped on today, the only way that this report provides value is if we become action-oriented civic leaders that work to advance the provisions that are set forth in this report. And you can count me into being a stark leader that's going to support these efforts. So with that, thanks again, and I'll turn it back to you, Eric. Have a great day.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. And let's transition now to Taniqua Broughton. Good to see you again, Taniqua. She is the executive director of the State of Black Arizona. She's been instrumental in scaling the State of Black Arizona from an advisory group to a nonprofit organization back in 2017. Taniqua has proven efficacy in enhancing systems, educating communities, and equipping citizens of Arizona. She also led the transition of the African American Leadership Institute from Valle de Sol and has cultivated the newest institute to start in Southern Arizona in the fall of 2021. And on May 13th, she will receive the Phoenix Business Journal's 2021 Most Admired Leader Award. Taniqua, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Excited to share the discussion with you and have you kick us off here.
Thank you, Eric, so much for the introduction and the opportunity to speak to the community. Good morning, everyone. And Chris, thank you for your remarks and the opportunity to team up with you and the staff. On behalf of the State of Black Arizona's Board Chair, Dr. Felicia Ganther, members of the board, and our staff, we are so pleased to have had the opportunity to team up with the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, our steering committee, to provide you this inaugural report. We are grateful to our supporting collaborators, the Arizona Center for Economic Progress, the Black Chamber of Arizona, the Black Philanthropic Initiative, and the Center for the Future of Arizona. Due to COVID-19 in the United States, the number of African-American business owners plummeted from 1.1 million in February 2020 to 600,000 in April, which is a loss of about 440,000 Black business owners, representing a 41% loss. We know that Black owner businesses need more support, more access to capital, networks, and other mechanisms for growth. Here is a bit of Arizona history. Black businesses in Arizona were allotted and championed as successes for economic development strategies a century ago. According to the Arizona Republic's Arthur Randall Smith, who founded Arizona's first African-American newspaper, the Phoenix Tribune, in 1918, often wrote editorials demanding educational opportunities for Black Arizonans and called for access in creating more Black-owned businesses. In 1922, the editorial Smith touted the accomplishments of Black leaders, including those starting businesses. He used census data to talk about the Black community and largely concentrated Black families in Arizona. The editorial spoke to issues that rang familiar in today, which he stated, in the community at large, indeed, little is known about us as we really are. We nevertheless have our own agency through which we work and serve our own and the biggest as the outer world. Fast forward nearly 5 decades through segregation, discrimination, and the epic struggle of civil rights and economic opportunities and equal opportunities. In 1969, President Richard Nixon created the Office of Minority Business Enterprise in the commercial department as a part of his Black capitalism. Political strategy, which promoted the idea of more entrepreneurial behaviors among people of color, would be promoting economic opportunities and equality. But Nixon allocated no funding for the office that was later rebranded and currently the Minority Business Development Agency during the Carter administration. Advocates have long called for a revamp of the agency and better funding to be more relevant to today's business needs and to do a better outreach to people of color. Clearly, through the decades, there have been times when we have needed to invest in the African-American business development strategies in Arizona and elsewhere, and we acknowledge they are addressed in varying degrees. It is telling that some version of our 21st century recommendations regarding the state of Black business in Arizona could be found in a place of discussions at various points during the last 100 years. It is also telling that we are primarily just talking, but in louder voices in this era of so-called reckoning about the legacy of racial injustice and inequality. This report is long awaited, and it is an attempt to move beyond talking to utilize the data and actualize our recommendations. The State of Black Arizona and our partners hope to provide you greater insight into the state of Black business community while feeling compelled to take greater action for investments in Black entrepreneurs and businesses. We believe intentional target investments of political, social, and business capital to implement inclusive economic strategies can build a better ecosystem for Black-owned businesses to create more prosperity overall Arizona's economy. Thank you.
All right, Taniqua, thank you so much. Stick around. We will have some questions coming up a little bit later on in the telecast. Okay, right now, without further ado, let's discuss this much anticipated State of Black Business report. So I'm going to ask Drew Callow, the research analyst at GPEC, and May Mubalu to join come on, open up your cameras. Let me talk about Drew quickly. He provides research support to GPEC's internal teams and studies industry, policy, and marketing trends related to Greater Phoenix economic development objectives. And May, her research focuses on state fiscal policy, education and workforce development, immigration, tribal policy, and the intersection of race and ethnicity in the economy. So Drew and May, thank you so much for joining us. Happy to see you both. And I will kick it over to you because I believe we have some slides ready to go. So Drew, May, it's all yours.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you to everybody attending the release of the first ever State of Black Business Report. Thank you very much to Taniqua, May, Robin, and everybody else on the steering committee for allowing me personally to be a part of this project. It means a lot to me. 2020 was a historic year. These types of cultural, social, and economic challenges rarely reach the level of magnitude that we saw this last year. And these moments in history have the opportunity to push us forward. And it's really up to us how we decide to move forward. The recent events have highlighted longstanding systemic inequities. More importantly, they highlight opportunities for economic growth, for building resiliency and anti-fragility in the face of unexpected circumstances, and for self-improvement and unlocking our full potential. And this report brings awareness to key opportunities and, more importantly, key prerogatives for us here in the great state of Arizona. Next slide, please. Now, this report utilizes currently available data to give a broad snapshot of the state of Black business in Arizona. We've organized the data into 4 primary buckets for easy digestion: demographics and labor force, income and purchasing power, business ownership, and entrepreneurship and investment. And to kick us off with the findings, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, May Mabulu.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Drew. Again, like everyone has mentioned, this report has really been a labor of love. So I'll just get started. Next slide, please. So as we know, Black Arizonans are employers, innovators, consumers, and taxpayers. They contribute to Arizona's culture, growth, and economy. Nationally, African Americans are about 42% of the US population and account for 12.8% of the total population. And when we look at Arizona, approximately 350 Black people live in the state. According to our most recent data, the African American population is actually up to 5% since we last pulled this data. Arizona generally has a strong history of attracting people from across the nation and from other countries. And this is true for the Black community. Arizona has seen a steady migration of African Americans during the last decade. Arizonans have roughly gained about 100,000 residents since 2010. In our state, African Americans have seen the fastest growth rate of any racial or ethnic group, growing by 33% since 2010. During that same time period, the state of Arizona saw an overall growth rate of 13%. Next slide, please. As Drew mentioned, we broke the report into 4 main sections. And for those who may be unfamiliar with this type of data, we provided definitions throughout the report so that you really understood what we were talking about when we referenced labor force and household income. So when I say labor force participation, I'm referring to the percent of residents that are age 16 and older that are either actively employed or seeking employment. So individuals not included in this data are people who maybe have retired or people who have decided to not go back into the workforce. Maybe there's a health reason, maybe they're caretaking for a family, or maybe they became a billionaire overnight, but they've chosen to opt out of the economy in this way. In Arizona, the Black labor force continues to remain strong and steady. We've seen growth over the last decade, increasing Black labor force participations by 59,000 people since 2010. This growth rate is 49%. This is a growth rate of about 49%. And in that same time period, the Arizona labor force growth rate was only 16%. So again, you see this pattern of Arizona's Black labor force growing at a faster rate than the statewide average. In Arizona, African Americans have a higher rate of participating in the labor force. In 2009, which is the most recent data, Black Arizonans had a participation rate of 68% compared to a statewide rate of 60%. And when we talk about where Black workers are, they predominantly reside in Phoenix and Tucson, with about 143,000 working in Phoenix and over 17,000 in Tucson. Next slide, please. This slide, what it's showing you, it's the size of Arizona's Black labor force as a reflection of the broader population. So what you see here statewide, African Americans represent about 5.1% of the state's labor force participation. And you have to remember the share of population, African Americans are about 5%. So it just kind of shows you that, again, we are small but mighty, and we are participating in the labor force at a little bit of a higher rate than our proportion to the population. Next slide, please. So Arizona's Black labor force is concentrated in certain industries, which is to be expected. This chart shows us that healthcare and social services account for about 30% of Arizona's Black workforce, while retail, trade, accommodation, and food services account for another 17%. The largest distribution disparities between Arizona and the US are in government, finance and insurance, and administrative service sectors. This disparity might come as a surprise to many African Americans and some people on this call, because growing up, many of us heard stories or learned early that it was safe to pursue jobs in government, maybe work for the post office or the airport, because historically, many of these agencies, government agencies, were early adopters of anti-discrimination provisions. So this data is really interesting. I get really excited about this. Because it's telling us a story, and a lot more research needs to be done. But today, nationally, about 1/5 of government workers are Black. So you see a higher proportion of Black folks still being attracted to government positions. But, and of course, for so long, for many African Americans, the public sector was seen as a pathway to middle class for the community. And so it's just interesting because this data is showing us a different story in Arizona. In Arizona, we have a lot less African Americans represented in government jobs. Another trend that I just wanted to point out that I thought was interesting is that Arizona, compared to nationally, Arizona has a higher number of African Americans that are working in finance and insurance. So there's a story being told there where African Americans in the state are getting more access to those job opportunities. Next slide. I think it's Drew's turn now. Sorry.
All right, let's talk about income. There does remain a significant gap in household income between Black and non-Black households. Over the last 5 years for which we have data, the median income for Black households has been about $9,000 to $10,000 less than the statewide median. And when you look at the individual income brackets, there are also gaps that are significant. About 25% of Black households earned less than $25,000 a year, compared to 19% of all households in Arizona. And for context, the poverty line for a 4-person household is about $26,000. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, about 18% of Black households earned over $100,000, compared to 26% of all households in the state. And unsurprisingly, this gap isn't unique to Arizona. This is a nationwide issue. And in fact, Arizona actually outperforms the nation. The nationwide gap between Black and total median household income is about $20,000, or twice the size that it is here in Arizona. And another good point of news, I guess, depending on how you look at it, is Arizona's income gap appears to be narrowing slightly, which is great. However, it's not so great when you look at the context of the rest of the nation, which has seen the gap increase. And there are several contributing factors to why Arizona has been able to close the gap, or has started to close the gap. That includes a tightening labor market, rising wages, and an influx of skilled Black and African Americans moving to Arizona. And all of these are bolstered by the fact that, Greater Phoenix has one of the most robust and growing economies in the country right now. Next slide, please. Looking at buying power, Black and African Americans account for 3.9% of all purchasing power in the state of Arizona, and this is consumer purchasing power. They are the fastest growing consumer base in the state, and our Black purchasing power is growing faster than those of at the national level and in neighboring states. Since 2010, Black purchasing power has grown by about 80%, which is twice the national rate, and it's expected to grow another 41% over the next 5 years. And again, this is thanks in part to a fast-growing Black and African American population here. And when you look at per capita, which is what this slide shows, Black buying power still lags behind the rest of the state here in Arizona by about $7,000 when you look at it per person. And albeit this is much less than the nationwide gap of about 15,000, again, twice as large. And what's more concerning is if you look at the graph on the right, the growth of per capita buying power for Black residents has not kept up with the total growth of per capita buying power at either the state or the national level. And if this isn't addressed directly, the income inequality gap is only going to continue to get larger. So this is something that is going to require direct action. Next slide, please. And we're going to move on to business ownership. In 2017, there were 1,195 Black-owned employer firms in Arizona, making up just 1% of all employer firms in the state. Collectively, these firms employed 11,900 workers, generated $1.4 billion in revenue, and accounted for almost $400 million in payroll. The average Black-owned employer firm in Arizona had 10 employees, generated 1.1 million in revenue, and contributed 331,000 in payroll. By comparison, the average employer firm for all of Arizona had twice as many employees, 5 times as much revenue, and nearly 3 times the payroll. And of particular interest is this chart here showing how relatively young Arizona's Black-owned firms are, nearly 60% of which are under 6 years old, compared to 40% of all firms in the state. And at the top of the chart, you can see that just 12% of Black-owned firms are over 15 years old, compared to a whopping 27% of all firms in the state. And this disparity could be indicative of a couple of different things. It could indicate a growing recent trend, an influx of Black entrepreneurship here. On the other hand, it could be indicative of systemic barriers to Black-owned businesses as they attempt to scale. Next slide, please. And business ownership, Arizona's Black business environment is growing. As you can see, between 2012 and 2017, we added about 350 new firms. That's a growth rate of about 42%. These businesses added 4,500 new jobs and $200 million in payroll. And of course, as we're finalizing this report, the 2018 data came out for businesses, and they release it in chunks. And so I was really wanting to use it, but I was like, we need to wait. And they've continued to grow, so there is optimism there. But as you can see by this chart, the most popular industry, similar to the labor force, is the healthcare and social assistance sector. It's seen explosive growth and accounts for over 40% of all Black-owned employer firms in the state. And interestingly, this industry distribution that you see for the state of Arizona is largely reflective of the industry distribution at the national level. The top 3 industries for Black-owned businesses in the country are healthcare, professional services, administrative support services, and retail trade is up there as well. And the high concentration of Black-owned firms in these sectors is due to a number of social and economic factors. One of the most significant being a lack of access to investment capital for Black entrepreneurs, which explains why, as you won't see on this chart, is there are virtually no employer firms in the manufacturing sector. Which typically is a sector that requires substantial startup capital. Same could be said for utilities, but there are also other barriers to entry there as well. And so, what we might be seeing here is that Black entrepreneurs are being funneled into industry sectors that have the lowest barriers to entry. And then I'm gonna hand it back to May.
Thank you, Drew. Next slide, please. So in this report, as Drew mentioned, entrepreneurship is a huge topic for the Black community. And again, when we are talking about entrepreneurship rate, we're referring to the percentage of people in a population or a demographic that start a business. So across the US and in Arizona, we know that small businesses are a significant source of employment and provide a variety of goods and services. And for those who are fortunate enough to start a small business, they can often offer a pathway to wealth building and prosperity. So unfortunately, African Americans are significantly underrepresented in US entrepreneurship. As of 2019, African Americans actually had the lowest entrepreneurship rate of any racial or ethnic group in the US. Similarly, Black entrepreneurs have the lowest opportunity share. And when I say opportunity share, I'm mainly talking about the ability to start a business. Most of the time, a lot of times African Americans are starting businesses out of necessity, maybe due to unemployment rather than opportunity. And this tends to be the case across any racial or ethnic group in the US. Unfortunately, a lot of the Black entrepreneurship data is very limited at the statewide level, so we have to lean on national data. So a lot of the national data shows that Black business owners have difficulty accessing capital and are more likely to have to rely on personal savings to fund these endeavors. So this PowerPoint is just showing that out of a survey sample of 500 venture capital backed startups between 2013 and 2017, only 1% of them were Black, compared to 77% were white and 18% were Asian. Next slide, please. Okay. Given the lack of funding for Black-owned businesses and startups, there are opportunities and steps Arizona leaders and business community can pursue to mitigate these stark and persistent inequities. Arizona has a highly connected business community and economy that continues to thrive under the culture of inclusion, as you've heard from a lot of the other speakers. We believe that business leaders can make a concerted effort to draw venture capital funding from outside the state, making capital more accessible to Black business owners in our state. So one of the things that we thought was important in this report was to kind of provide at least 4 recommendations or early steps that business leaders can start to pursue in order to create a more equitable economy for Black residents in Arizona. So I'm just going to go through some of them. Oops. Okay. Now, first one, leverage research and conduct a study on the viability and retention of Black-owned businesses. This includes identifying the challenges, the needs and trends and opportunities for Black business owners. The study should really work to identify the systemic barriers to capitals and opportunities that could impact the success of Black businesses. Number 2, leverage regional connections to drive internal and external investments. We know that the local startup community would benefit from coordinated efforts at promoting and targeting out-of-state venture capital firms. Number 3, increase support for Black-owned businesses. This includes educational opportunities, direct financing and pathways to capital, startup resources, collaborative research, and assistance in identifying and navigating business opportunities in the state. I think this one is so important that when you recognize so many African Americans are maybe starting from a deficit, that mentorship is going to be a key to helping the young Black entrepreneur who's looking to start a business. And number 4, the last one is to design a publicly available, comprehensive statewide directory of Black-owned businesses in Arizona. The directory should include data on key economic measures such as revenue, growth margins, industry affiliation, number of employees, years of operation. I think for so long, the rhetoric around Black businesses, there hasn't been a rhetoric because I think African Americans are often seen as such a small portion of Arizona's population, but we know they are business owners, they are workers, they contribute to the economy in such big ways that there needs to be more effort around the data and making it publicly available to everybody. So we hope that these recommendations can serve as a sample of ideas and starting points for Arizona to begin to strategically promote economic justice and opportunity for the hundreds of Black Arizonans that are here and the many that continue to migrate to our state every year. Thank you.
May and Drew, that was fantastic. Unbelievable job putting all that together. Incredible data, incredible research. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to bring in Robin Inoue, Robin Reed, President and CEO of the Black Chamber of Arizona. In collaboration with the board, Robin has transformed the chamber into an inclusive and forward-thinking community that delivers quality tools and information to its members. And Oye, among his many accomplishments, he's the founder and CEO of Hustle Phoenix. Volunteer roles and passions, Oye was selected by the Phoenix Business Journal as among the city's top 40 under 40 businessmen and women for 2018. Excited to hear both of your thoughts, perspectives after seeing that report. And Robin, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Eric, and really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this valuable discussion. A couple of things. One, obviously, seeing the disparities between Black businesses and the Black economy versus the economy as a whole, it can be perceived as disappointing, but I will tell you where I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged by the fact that we are gathering the data. I'm encouraged by the fact that so many organizations are now participating in collecting information because, simply put, if we can measure it, we can manage it. So it looks like we've at least started to measure this data.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I have to echo Robin. It is a little disappointing understanding the numbers and seeing where we are, but I think, again, encouraged by the fact that we've spent the time to research and develop key resources and also understand what's going on so then we can move forward. So.
Well, yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about Hustle Phoenix because much of that report focused on Black entrepreneurship. Tell us a little about your organization and your path building it.
Sure. I think the organization I lead, again, Hustle Phoenix, our mission is to empower men and women in underserved communities with the intellectual, social, and financial capital to start businesses that bring flourishing to the city of Phoenix. And so our focus is really urban inner cities. So we not only serve African-American entrepreneurs, but other Hispanic entrepreneurs and also Native entrepreneurs. But largely the African-American entrepreneurs we serve, Hustle Phoenix was started because we understand inherently the issues that are going on in our society. One, when they talked about the social and financial capital. And so our theory of change is that the difference between wealth and poverty is relationships. And I'll say it again, the difference between wealth and poverty is relationships. So a lot of the data that was connected and that we just heard, I think is connected to a lot of African Americans are not connected in the right circles. And obviously because of historical discrimination and the things that we understand in our history. And so Hustle Phoenix seeks to essentially create solutions to the problems that we see in our communities throughout Phoenix, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship. So not only do we provide, again, that intellectual capital, the social capital with the mentoring, but also financial capital. We just launched a fund where we're able to get loan money to entrepreneurs in our communities because a lot of these entrepreneurs can't go to the traditional banks to get access to capital for their businesses.
Yeah, I love what you just said. And Robin, I circled it too, leverage regional connections in that report. And do you agree there? That's one of the keys. And Drew was saying, there's a lot of things that are going to need direct action. One of the things we can do initially as business leaders in this community is leverage those regional connections.
Eric, I am all about relationships. I think that having those connections, sometimes, like they say, sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. And organizations like Hustle Phoenix and GPEC and so many others have been working very hard for quite a while to serve the Black community. But if you don't know how to get to them, then the opportunity is lost. So yes, I absolutely believe that it's about leveraging connections, leveraging relationships.
All right, let's bring Drew and May back in now. We're going to have some time to get to some questions. I'll have you both turn your cameras on. There you are. Good to see you again. Quick question. I guess I'll start with May. What industry sectors stand to gain the most from intentional and inclusive recruitment? Because a lot of that report showed those disparities and you focused on the healthcare side, but what industry sectors stand to gain the most?
I think this might be more of a Drew question.
Drew.
Because Drew really spoke about where Black entrepreneurs were being shifted into, the industries that we were seeing. So Drew, can you maybe talk about the industries that we're not showing up in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when looking at these opportunities, you have to, I think, measure both the economic potential of the community and also the economic potential of the region. So obviously, Greater Phoenix has a strong healthcare and social assistance sector. So there's no surprise that we're seeing high growth there. Manufacturing is absolutely a key area. We have a robust industrial and manufacturing sector here, and it's only projected to continue to grow. And so if there is a substantial financial barrier that needs addressing, I think that's a kind of a low-hanging fruit, I suppose you could say. But really, I mean, the finance and insurance sector obviously is very strong here as well, and we're seeing robust growth there as well. But there's always more that can be done. Ideally, we'd like to see parity in the growth rates between, the total economy and the Black economy, and we're just not there yet. So, all of the above are opportunities.
Robin, I have a question for you because we've had these discussions. You and I have had these discussions, and May, it's something that hit my ear. She said government jobs represented a path to the middle class. Again, on this question of where are those other possibilities, where are those other opportunities, how important is it that those areas see growth quickly?
Well, it's vital. If you were to ask me my opinion, I think everything down the real estate continuum is where we need a great deal of growth. We need more people of color in construction. We need more people of color in real estate sales, both commercial and residential. We need more people of color in real estate finance, because without that, the Black community isn't hearing the story of the value of real estate, which then converts to why we are very low in terms of real estate ownership, because we're coming into the party after all the prices have gone up. Really, I mean, I'm former owner of a mortgage company. I can tell you, we're joining the party at the top of the market. So we're not getting that equity that allows us to gain wealth through real estate ownership. So I think that to have more focus on growth in construction, sales, and real estate finance would make a significant impact.
And a question for you here. May mentioned the influx of Black entrepreneurs into the area, into the greater Phoenix area. And I know you probably have had a lot of conversations initially when they're moving here or having those, like what it takes to build a business here. What have those conversations been like with communities of color and Black entrepreneurs? Is Arizona doing the right things to help them on the path they need to get to?
That's a loaded question, but I would start here. When a lot of folks come to Arizona, they reach out to us and ask how we can help them with their ventures. And so we provide that family and community for them so then they can grow their businesses. And so I think I'll go back to that social capital discussion in regards to, we provide them with mentors and a lot of support to give them almost the backing, if you will, to be able to help them grow and build. And so the conversation is always around, how can I move quick and how can I gain access to money, right? How can I move quick? How can I gain access to money? The beautiful thing about Arizona is it's not like very entrenched with so many different rules. So then entrepreneurship is welcomed here. But I think, again, that support is what's needed for entrepreneurs as they move forward, especially African-American entrepreneurs.
Question coming in for Robin and Oye. Edelman found that 71% of workers trusted their own employer to usher in change with respect to systemic racism. Greater Phoenix performs in the top 5 of metros with Black representation in management, yet are still underrepresented by 27 points. Genuine racial equity must be more than simply corporate statements and philanthropy. What do you believe is the best way to mitigate racial bias toward Black and minority-owned businesses and close this gap? So again, another big question there. Robin, I'll start with you.
So that sounds like Michael Langley. I've heard Michael talk on that topic before. Here's the thing. We don't have to solve these problems sequentially. we can just take the action step of moving more minorities into management and executive positions while we work on removing biases. There's nothing that says you got to remove all your biases before a Black person can get promoted. So I think that's really key. There's a very interesting study that was done by, I believe, the McKinsey Institute that indicated that companies that have greater ethnic diversity at the executive levels of their companies have a 36% greater chance of having above average profits. So the bottom line is, bias, no bias, it's good for business.
May, what were some of the things, when you were putting that report together that encouraged you? What were some of the things that you thought, put it on paper and thought, yes, this is what we need to hear?
Thank you, Eric. I think we haven't seen a report like this in the state of Arizona probably in the last decade. So we were filling a gap, right? And I think it's something to be said, the number of people that registered for this webinar, that Arizonans are looking for this information. They're looking for ways to get involved and support their neighbors and their community. I think Arizona is going to continue to be a state that attracts people of color, and especially the Black community, because you're seeing these moments where Arizona is offering the Black community to participate in industries that they haven't had access to historically. And so it's hard to pick one thing, right? It really is. For such a small population, we were grateful to even have this much data. And I think what it comes down to is, what this report should only be a stepping stone and a start, the additional data we need to start collecting so that we can really create pointed and targeted interventions and really uplift Black folks who've moved here or who live here and started businesses. Drew, I see you shaking your head, so of course, feel free to add. Honestly, Drew and I think we've probably talked about this for 20 plus hours, going back and forth about key indicators in this data that got us excited. We're the research nerds like that.
Yeah, if I can piggyback, I think one thing that I find optimism in is that there is a growing awareness, not just here in Arizona, but nationally, for a need for data, because that is one of the biggest barriers. Is we don't have the data, and we need it. So the census recently restructured how they do their economic survey. The data available for minority-owned businesses used to come out every 5 years, which is why we had 2012 and 2017. Well, now they've kind of combined some of their census surveys to where hopefully we're seeing that data every year. They just released 2018 data like less than a month ago or something like that. And I really wanted to include it, but I didn't have all of it, and it would have just really have been confusing and my head would have exploded. So we didn't include it. But yeah, I do see a lot of optimism.
All right, I want to remind the viewers, we have a very large live audience, to take advantage of that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We have questions coming in, and I apologize as I read some of these cold coming in. Here's a question, assuming it's for all the panelists. I work with ASU and am hearing daily from employers looking to recruit more diverse technical and engineering talent. We continue to connect them with our National Society of Black Engineers student chapter, but would love to expand these opportunities into the community. Any other professional organizations you might recommend? I'll let anybody jump in.
I think to Robin's point, the Black Chamber of Commerce would be a great place to start also.
Thanks, Oye. We actually do have several members and several relationships with engineering firms that are Black owned. And at the same time, we're always looking to make those new relationships, as is Oye and GPEC and others. I would just say, please reach out to all of our organizations. You shouldn't assume that GPEC isn't also going to be a fantastic resource for what you're looking for. But I have to say, you've got to reach out. You've got to connect with us. We don't know where you are, and we don't know where the need is unless you let us know.
Oh yeah, I have a question. You mentioned the mentorship, how big and important that is part of your role. And you mentioned one of the patterns that you're hearing is that need access to capital. What are those other conversations that are coming up, or the commonality, the pattern, and when you're mentoring a young entrepreneur here in the greater Phoenix area?
I think it's not only access to capital, but support. I think one of the things we talked about, and going back to like 2 questions ago, you talked about, hey, what can we do? And I think we have a lot of people on this call. I think a lot of times when we think about this work, especially around Black entrepreneurs and African-American entrepreneurs, it's really outside of ourselves. But I think with this conversation, we need to keep it local. We need to keep it personal and immediate. Local, meaning local to Arizona. How are we supporting African-American entrepreneurs? Are we actively using their businesses? Personal, what are we doing personally to contribute to the growth of African entrepreneurship in this community? And then immediate, we have to do it now. I think it's great. I think they talked about corporate statements. I think a lot of times post George Floyd, there's a lot of corporate statements in regards to diversity and inclusion around African Americans. But I think we need to keep it personal. What are we going to do personally to contribute and help African-American entrepreneurship in this community? And I think one way is to spend money with some great African-American businesses that we have throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area, and also in addition to some.
And Robin, I'll ask you about immediate actions we could take, because I love that slide that Drew and May showed where there was action. There were action items in the presentation. And I know you're an action guy. So tell me more about what we can and should be doing. And as Oye said, immediately.
Well, I actually really love the way Oye phrased it. We've got to make it personal, and we've got to make it immediate. Yes, Eric, I believe that the time for talk is over. Studies, questions, great, but it's time to do something. Again, just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you can't and shouldn't do something. I think that's what each person and each company needs to do. We need to figure out what we can do and do that. I believe that what that will create is momentum. I think the results from the momentum will prove how valuable this work will be. And I believe that we can truly accelerate all the work we're trying to do if everybody will just commit to taking one step forward.
And on the note of access to capital, because it keeps coming up, that is one of the biggest things that we need to address. So what are some of those specific hurdles in preventing access to capital that can be addressed?
So I think when you think about venture capital, most, if not all, I think 1%, the statistic was 1% of venture capital goes to African-American led businesses. And what that tells me is that there, again, lack of relationship and lack of understanding. And so I believe we need more African-American led venture capital firms, not only in this city, but nationwide, to be able to continue to invest in African-American led businesses. And also the banking industry. I think CDFIs are a good place to start, community development financial institutions, to be able to invest in African-American led companies, but also we need banks to step up. I think there's a history in our banking system nationwide where it's not been privy to African-Americans, especially as it relates to access to capital. So what can we do in the banking industry to create programs and systems to be able to help African-Americans access capital so they can launch and build and grow their businesses?
Drew, I'll let you weigh in, or May, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think Oye and Robin are really talking about this historical context and a social and economic issue that continues to happen, which I don't have the stat off the top of my head right now, but African Americans continue to go unbanked at elevated numbers than the rest of the population. So it's about educating early and often. Everyone in society has a role to play. Maybe you're a teacher and there's a young Black kid who thinks about becoming a business owner one day. Like, what is the conversations you're having with him early and often? Maybe you are someone who's trying to attract more business STEM folks or business engineers. What is the intervention that you've done in high school and you started the moment they landed on your campus? Everyone has a role in this. So I think that's what I just wanted to end with.
Eric, if I could add something to that too. So I think a couple of things. We can't overlook the fact that businesses have to be bankable. And that's where the great work of Hustle Phoenix, some of the work we do, and there's so many great organizations here in the Valley that are working to educate our small businesses and give them the tools to become bankable, because we can't hold a bank responsible for not funding an unqualified applicant. But I always love the why should we do it? Well, here's why. Citigroup just did a study, the banking giant Citigroup did a study in 2020, September, that proved that if Black businesses had had access to capital over the last 20 years, it would have added $13 trillion into the US economy. So again, it's just good business.
Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, everything they said. What really struck me was Oye's statement about the importance of relationships, because the relationships for building capital and acquiring capital are absolutely critical. And if people that, and it's not just with banks, obviously you need a relationship with a bank that you can lean on to gain capital or loans in times of crisis, but you also, you need a professional and personal network to lean on sometimes too. And that's how so many entrepreneurs get started. They get a loan from somebody or that they know personally, or they have an asset in their home because they own their home. And there have just been so many long-standing barriers that have really made things particularly difficult for this community. And so addressing holistically these issues, I think, is really, really critical.
Yeah, I feel like that path is sort of happening on this call, where is the business bankable? That's Oye. It's his job to make sure the business is bankable. Then the relationship begins, and we'll talk to Robin, we'll talk to other business leaders, and then we'll find, whether it's venture capital, whether it's, changes in the banking system, where those relationships will pay off. Right, Oye? Did I get that?
You got it.
Oye, tell me about some of the other things that are maybe not silver linings, but things you were excited about, things that you're seeing in your daily work that have you motivated for 2021.
I think what I see is hope. And a lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with and that we serve, there's a level coming out of this pandemic, the racial crisis that we experienced in 2020, people and the people that we're serving, there's a level of hope and saying like, hey, we believe that as we move forward, we are stronger because we just went through probably one of the toughest years in our lifetime. And so hope is one of the things that I see that's consistent and that gets me excited and keeps me going.
All right, we have a few more minutes before we pause for a screenshot. We'll do some final wrap up here. And Drew, I'll start with you. Again, what a great report, what an in-depth report. And then on the heels of this great discussion as well. So I'll give you the opportunity for some final thoughts here, and we'll kind of go around the panelists.
Yeah, honestly, what's in my head is just how grateful I am to be a part of this, and this is something that really matters to me. And I'm glad that I can use my talents and my skill set and my attributes to kind of help things along in my own way. As Oye and Robin said, we all need to participate however we can. And so that's really what I'm trying to do here. And I look forward to continuing to help as we kind of move forward. And the optimism's never been higher for me and for Arizona. And we're really at a pivotal moment culturally, economically, where we can really take some major leaps forward. And I want to make sure that happens.
May, I'll transition over to you. I like how Drew said the optimism is high, but now we've identified where those gaps are. So I'll let you kind of have some closing thoughts here.
Thank you, Eric. Again, I echo the sentiment of everyone on this panel that, this is not just a Black business report. This is a report about the lives of Black Arizonans. We've moved to the state, we're from the state, we want to be contributing to the economy, we want to be part of the economy. And I think this report is an opportunity for leadership to really figure out what changes and actions they can adopt to really start bringing in this community that has been forgotten and left out. I think this is an opportunity for GPEC and AZ Center and others to identify more opportunities to collect data so we can tell the story. because I think for so long, African Americans, we've experienced it head on. We've experienced how difficult it is to get access to get capital, to start a business, not knowing what to do. And now we finally have the data that complements these stories and these lived experiences. And so my goal is that this does not fall on deaf ears, that leaders are listening, that the media is listening, that business owners, that people that are interested in starting businesses are here today. And we'll read this report, we'll cherish this report, and wait for the next report to come out and see if we've made headway. Thank you.
Thanks, May. And I saw Nicole put that, the link to that report is in the chat. Oye, some final thoughts?
Yeah, really quick. Thank you, Eric. I'll just say, I think we need to keep it immediate. We need to move beyond corporate statements and create and take immediate action. And so I think I'll start there. And I'd like to recommend a book called The Color of Money by Mersha. I can't remember her last name, but it's the title is about Black banks and the racial wealth gap. And if people on this call are really interested in this topic, I would encourage you to read that book, but then also go serve and start using Black businesses, because that's what we need in this community. So thank you.
I love that, Oye. And Robin, I'll end with you, but you know, it's been a common theme that we've always talked about, like allyship and ways to do that. And Oye just offered that up. Like, hey, you want to learn something? Read The Color of Money. And if we want things to happen immediately, let's bank on some of that allyship getting things done. So I'll ask you to kind of close us out here before we pause for a screenshot of what today is all about.
Well, thank you, Eric, and thank you everyone for just allowing me to participate in again, this vital discussion. I will say, number one, the report is only the end of this phase of research. It's actually the beginning of the work we're going to do. Two things came out of it: incredible data, but more importantly, evidence that all of our organizations can work together to create something that is of value to the entire community. So I will tell you, I'm excited about continuing work with the state of Black Arizona, GPEC, Hustle Phoenix, Center for the Future of Arizona, because I'm hoping that maybe we can start to create that guide for the action items and the action steps that can be taken. Instead of trusting everybody to do something, maybe we can build that guide and help those businesses and individuals help us move this forward.
All right, Robin, thank you so much. Thank all the panelists.